This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 194, Online Marketing for Schools, an interview with Jon Buscall of Moondog Marketing and Media. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you grow your tribe and your bottom line through insanely good content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is September 29th, 2016. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and now also Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe. I am also happy to report that my new book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win, is now available on Amazon in book and Kindle format. And to see what thought leaders such as Joe Polizzi, Jay Baer, and Jeff Hazlett thought about the book, and to snag your own copy, go to contentmarketingcoachbook.com. Now, before we get down to business, I have a request. As you know, I'm always eager to hear what you want to hear about on this podcast, and I've received a listener request for an episode on influencer marketing. So I am looking for an expert to interview. So if you know of a wonderful expert on influencer marketing who has a lot of insights that they could share with us, please let me know, and I will definitely get in touch with this person and see about booking them on the show. And the best way to do that is to send me an email at Rachel, that's Rachel, at resonancecontent.com. Okay, on to business. In last week's episode, we responded to a listener request, speaking of listener requests, in addressing the question of how to tailor your content for global audiences. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or our various other venues or via the RSS feed. Today, we are delighted to welcome back to the podcast my friend Jon Buscall, who will be coming on to talk about his latest ebook, The Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Okay, lots to talk about in this week's news feed. First of all, big news out of Twitter, something that they have been dangling in front of us for ages, and it has finally become a reality. So on Twitter, photos, videos, GIFs, polls, and quote tweets no longer count toward your 140 character limit. So if you are tweeting and want to attach any one of those items, then those links will no longer count toward your limit. Hallelujah. I gotta say, it's something that I deal with both for myself and my clients, and it's just great to be able to fill out those tweets without having to worry whether I have enough characters to include those images and other elements. A couple of things to point out. According to an article on Marketing Land, this does not apply to promoted tweets. So if you're creating Twitter ads, you will still have to deal with that, the images being part of that character limit. But a way around that is if you post a regular tweet and then promote it, then you're good. So just a tip for those of you who do promoted tweets. Also, third-party sites, if you use a third-party app for your tweeting, they're slowly catching up. I notice I use HubSpot for a lot of my clients' tweeting, and they have not yet implemented that. In other words, if you attach a photo, it's still counting it towards that limit and not letting you post if you go over that limit. So I'm sure they will slowly get on board with this new feature from Twitter. Okay, big news out of Google also this week. In a very rare move, Google has announced an update before it goes into effect. What? I know, crazy, right? So do you remember back in 2015 when we had Mobilegeddon, where everybody was freaking out because Google was upping the importance of sites being mobile friendly? Well, part 2 of Mobilegeddon is set to release in January 2017. And this will be targeting what Google calls intrusive interstitials. That's what regular folks call pop-ups. Okay, and I'm gonna quote here from the Google Webmasters blog. Here's what Google has to say about it. Google pages that show intrusive interstitials, also known as pop-ups, provide a poorer experience to users than other pages where content is immediately accessible. This can be problematic on mobile devices where screens are often smaller. To improve the mobile search experience after January 10th, 2017, pages where content is not easily accessible to a user on the transition from the mobile search results may not rank as highly. So if you have pop-ups on your pages, you may want to look at that before January 2017. That having been said, I need to tell you that not all interstitials, pop-ups, will be affected. Google goes on to describe if the pop-up has to do, for example, with a legal obligation. So if it's a site where you have age-restricted content, if it's a beer company or something like that, and you need to have people verify their age in a pop-up, that will not be affected. Login pop-ups will not be affected. And as Google puts it, quote, banners that use a reasonable amount of screen space, unquote, will not affect your ranking. And so a big old banner that takes up the whole screen, that's probably going to be a problem, but a smaller one that maybe appears just maybe the top fourth of the screen may not affect you as much. There's much more information in the announcement on the Google Webmaster blog, and I will, of course, include a link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, finally, we've got a neat new feature on Instagram. Instagram has added a new feature that lets you start creating a post, save it as a draft, and then edit it and share it later. So let's say if you snap a photo and you want to edit it, or you want to add filters, or if you want to add a caption later on, you can actually save that draft and go back to it later. And this is great for things like events. You know, if your company is hosting a conference and you're running around snapping pictures, and some of them need to be cropped, some of them you want to put a caption with the speaker's name, and you don't have time to do it while you're running around snapping pictures, you can go ahead and save those drafts, go back to them later, add the caption, and then share them on Instagram. So a pretty neat little feature. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called 12 Tips for Content Marketing from an SEO Perspective. This is written by Rebecca Sentance, Sentance, over at Search Engine Watch. And you know, this is something I need to be reminded of. One of the reasons we do all this, yes, we want to grow our thought leadership, we want to build relationships, but a big reason that we do this is we want to drive traffic to our websites. So as content marketers, we need to be always mindful of that SEO aspect of what we do. And as this article points out, sometimes we think of SEO after the fact. You know, we've created our content, now we're going to think about how to optimize it. But actually, the best way to get the biggest bang for our buck, if you'll pardon the expression, we need to think about search from the very beginning of the content creation process. And in this post, Rebecca shares some terrific tips, and I will, of course, include a link in the blog post for this episode so that you can gain the wisdom of her insights. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at @RachParker so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Online Marketing for Schools, an interview with Jon Buscall. This week, we are delighted to welcome back a longtime friend of the podcast, Jon Buscall, to share his insights on online marketing for schools. Insights, by the way, that are pretty darn useful for any business. So if you are not in the education industry, I encourage you to stick around because he's going to share some great insights that all of us can benefit from. By the way, I am having an issue with the audio for these interviews. For some reason, my call recorder records the interviewee end of the audio much louder than it does my voice, which is fine for me because the interview is the start of the show, but it can be a little disconcerting, and I do my best in post-production to rectify that difference in volume levels. But if you happen to notice an imbalance in the volume, that is the reason. And by the way, if you use call record and you've found a workaround for this issue, let me know. We'd love to hear about it. It's kind of annoying. Okay, on to the interview. Jon Buscall, PhD, is the CEO of Moondog Marketing. What a great name. That is a Swedish marketing agency based in Stockholm. He is also the host of the Online Marketing and Communications podcast, one podcast that I always recommend. And you can find him online at moondogmarketing.com. Jon has also recently published a new ebook called The Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online, and was kind enough to join us and share some of his insights. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Jon Buscall. Hi, Jon. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I should say welcome back. We're delighted to have a returning guest on the show.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, Jon, I just gave our audience your official bio, but can you please give us a little bit more personal introduction to yourself and to Moondog Marketing and Media?
I'm an ex-academic turned marketer 15 years ago. I moved into marketing after really tiring of having 200 students every semester, and I wanted to get involved in what was happening online. Nowadays, I run an inbound marketing agency out of Stockholm, Sweden.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And that was actually my next question. I know you're a full-time marketer these days, but you have very deep roots in the educational field. So tell us a little bit more about that, about your experience and how you made the transition.
Well, I was one of those people in grad school who just wanted to read books, and I did. And so I did a PhD and went off into academia, and I was a university lecturer for almost 10 years working with writing and communications. And it wasn't how I imagined. I thought I'd have more time to do what I had studied, more time to write, more time to explore, and all my time was taken up with working with students. That's not to say that I didn't love that, but I found that the skills that I'd amassed in doing my graduate work weren't really being fed into what I wanted to do. But I maintained, when I jumped out of people thought I was crazy to walk away from a professor's, university lecturer's job. To start an agency. But I did that, and I started working with educational customers right away. I was helping Stockholm University here in Sweden market themselves, creating marketing activities to reach international audiences. I kept my hand in by teaching a class on marketing at a local high school. And so I've always maintained an interest in education. I still, even all these years later, 2004, I dropped and jumped ship. Even nowadays, I still work as an examiner at the university. Once a semester, I go in and evaluate a bunch of degree essays. So I'm a big believer in education, non-profits, what you can do in those markets.
Wonderful. Well, Jon, your new ebook is titled The Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online, which is kind of a perfect storm for you, bringing together your two passions. Tell me about how you came across the need for this resource and the decision to produce an ebook on this topic.
Well, Rachel, thank you for asking that question, because that really enables me to say schools need to work with marketing. And I learned this back in 2006. One of our very first clients wanted to grow their school, and we got them on this website called Facebook.
I've heard of them.
Back in the day. And we got them blogging. And through blogging and getting them to use digital cameras, the very early days of digital cameras, we got them to tell their own story. Now, I wouldn't take credit for it, but the school went on to stop being in the boonies and become one of the biggest schools in central Stockholm. Their grade average skyrocketed to get people into the school. And one of the factors the principal told us was, you helped us market the school through telling our story, that people people stopped listening to what we were telling them. We were showing them our story.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that really was one of the things that convinced me about the value of content marketing, telling your own story through content. Now, we worked with them for many years, and then when the head moved over to one of the most elite schools in the country, the Swedish king went to this school, so it's that kind of school, and she asked us to come along and help tell their story too. And so now we've worked with a couple of schools, couple of universities, schools abroad. And I felt that when I look at so many schools, how they're competing, whether it's for it's a difficult word, municipality funding, because some schools get their income from what the local council pays for when they recruit for them, and some schools get their money by student fees, that schools still need to attract parents or students. And so I decided to write an ebook about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. You know, it's funny, John, something I'm seeing here in the States in the educational field is that in the past, the task of marketing was kind of like, the administrator with the least on her plate would be assigned the marketing role and to
Absolutely.
buy some ad space. But it seems that they're getting, as competition increases, they're getting more and more professionals, hiring professional marketers to take on that role. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The schools we talk to are in a position where traditional print advertisers call them all the time and say, you need to be in this magazine, you need to be in that magazine, or they're from online news sites or online, sites online and say, you need banner advertising with us. And school leaders, administrators, whoever's handling the marketing accounts, and often it's the heads who are having to, the principals or their personal assistants who are having to field all this, just don't have a marketing background. And they want to put their budget into the school, into learning, into resources for kids anyway. So there is a real need to understand the market. People in education don't really get that there are other ways to reach audiences, whether it's through social media or search engine optimization or putting it all together with a cogent content marketing plan. And I think the schools that, because they want to put their resources into their kids, they try and bootstrap. And that's where the ebook came in, because I wanted to give schools, the opportunity to get an overview, a top-level overview of how to put a campaign together, how to put your materials together, and if you need to bootstrap it, to follow a plan that we've seen worked with not just educational customers, but many businesses.
Sure. Sure. And another thing, John, I noticed that in this ebook, and also I listened to your podcast where you launched it, that you take a specific interest in boarding schools. So is this a particular area of interest for you?
Yeah, it is, because the boarding market is it's very competitive.
Mm.
International boarding schools here in Europe, whether it's Sweden, the UK, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, we've just been talking to, they are competing for students all around the world. It's quite interesting because, for example, Russia, China, many students from those countries look to international boarding schools because they want education in English.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives them that competitive advantage, whether it's in their own country or whether they take their multicultural, bilingual educational background to other countries. So that for me was really interesting, specifically because, and also because that's where recruitment is so important in terms of money and resources, rather than just your average public school.
Right, exactly. John, I have to admit, I kind of played a game with myself and said, okay, what's the first thing I think of when I think of boarding school? And I have to admit, my first thought was from the movie The Sound of Music, where the evil Baroness wants to send the kids off to boarding school because she doesn't want to deal with them. Now, am I just a Neanderthal, or is that stereotype still something that boarding schools have to deal with?
I think it is something they have to deal with. Many people will start asking questions about pastoral care, about resources. Parents who, for example, work for a top company. They go out on secondment, or they have to go to Africa for a couple of years, or South America. They don't always want to take their kids with them. Nowadays, it's increasingly common to take your children to give them that whole international experience. But they do go through this kind of, I want my child to stay in education in my home country, or perhaps put them in Britain or wherever. And then the parents themselves have this misconception that boarding could be a really, really difficult thing for their child to overcome. And so that's the kind of thing that schools need to communicate through content marketing, if you like, to tell their story, that there are very happy kids in boarding, that it opens up a whole world of opportunities. Of course, it's not going to be right for some. It would have broken my heart if you'd put me in boarding school.
Right, exactly. Well, John, one thing that I really appreciate about this ebook is that you devote a lot of time and attention to the audience. And anyone who's listened to my podcast knows that that is a drum I beat constantly. Know your audience, and you get very specific about creating buyer personas. So, what would you say that most schools and actually most businesses, for that matter, what do they typically get wrong when it comes to audiences and personas?
Um, I, I think I'm glad you made the point there about and other businesses, because I think one of the things with the book is it is a strategy that is applicable. It's transferable to many other businesses. And when I launched the book, people like yourself from other industries came back and said, "Oh, this is applicable." In terms of buyer personas, I think what companies or schools get wrong is they don't think about their target audience. They don't really drill down into the segment. A typical sales funnel is those 5 steps from awareness, interest, evaluation, decision, purchase. And if you are going to be found at the awareness stage, you need to be creating the right kind of content that is strategically aligned with a particular target audience. So, for example, maybe it's in the ebook, I talk about a mother who's say in her mid-40s, who's being sent to China to work for 2 years with her husband, and their children who are in the final years of school want to get their qualifications from the country that they're living in. So boarding school becomes a possibility for them. And it's at that point in the awareness stage of the sales funnel that you want your messaging to specifically connect with that persona. So that's why we say, do your research, talk to the different segments of audience that you've got in your business or school, learn who they are, and create these really quite detailed customer archetypes.
Yeah, that's one point that you make very well, John, is that when some schools think about their target audience, they would say, "Oh, parents of 12 to 16-year-olds," and there's so much more that needs to go into creating an effective
Absolutely.
persona.
Absolutely. If you survey the customers you've already got, if you talk to everyone who's involved in the buying process within your school organization, whether it's the admin people, the bursar, teachers who speak at open houses, students, you want to drill down into the information to learn as much about that typical archetype that you want to sell to. Now, it could be that you're looking to open up a new market to approach a new segment. And that means you need to understand, well, where are these people online? One of the things that we see, for example, is that moms are very typically online on Friday evenings on Facebook. Between the age of 35 to 55 demographic, there is a much, much better chance of finding that demographic on Facebook than any other if you're marketing a school. So if that's the case, your marketing materials should speak to that specific audience on that specific channel at that specific time. So I mean, you can see, Rachel, where I'm going here. But it's only by understanding, by doing some data research. And then, of course, you've got to have the brand voice that speaks to them effectively. So you've got to really know these people inside out.
Yep, absolutely. Another kind of bigger picture topic that you cover very well is the unique value proposition. Now, I have to confess, I have always used the terms unique selling proposition and unique value propositions somewhat interchangeably, but John, you have educated me on the difference between them. So, tell us about about those two concepts and the role that each proposition plays in an effective marketing strategy?
Well, for me, the unique value proposition is what you are selling, what you're offering, what is your key business around. But the unique value proposition is why the customer should choose your version of what you're offering, what you bring to the play, what makes you different.
Right.
So, for example, if we've got two schools and they are both international, offering international educations with a focus on sports, they've both got the same unique value proposition. It's exactly the same. But the unique selling position, sorry, they've both got the same unique selling position. But one of them, their value propositions will be different. One of them might say, well, we've got international education with a focus on sports in classes where there's no more than 18 students. And that becomes their value proposition. The bit that makes them really different, why choose us? What value do we bring to the whole process? And I think any business, no matter what you're in, there are an infinite number of businesses, really. And I think we as business owners, as marketers, really have to understand the value our business brings to that niche, that market. No matter what, we might know our unique selling position, but what's the value?
Right, and we do need both.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yep. So we have to know what it is we're selling, which for some businesses that might be, that
That's not enough.
right. There might be a little fuzziness right there. It's okay, what are we selling? And then decide, okay, what is it that makes us unique? What brings our customers, parents, whoever our audience, what brings them to us specifically?
Yeah, the value that we bring. If you think about it in terms of the sales funnel, at the evaluation point, someone who's thinking about sending their kid to a school will be in the sales funnel, possibly looking at two schools and evaluating both. They're just about to make that decision. Both those schools fit their choice of a small school in a rural area, close to town, and that one school there is going to win. They're going to choose one school, and it's the school who makes their value proposition clear there, that where is the real benefit of choosing this particular school. And that has to be strategically aligned with your buyer persona, because if you know them and you know what value they're looking for, then you can communicate that in your marketing materials.
Yep, absolutely. So from there, John, you get into more of kind of what we call the nuts and bolts of online marketing, things like, and I love that you start with building a successful website, because you made the point so many schools want to just jump into Facebook and Pinterest, and you make the point, okay, the point of all that is to drive traffic to your website, and if that's not a good experience, then all the rest is for naught.
Yeah, exactly. When we were doing the research for, well, SWOT analysis for customers in education and also doing the research for the book, we found that so often schools are busy trying out lots of things, being on social, making Facebook their main platform to communicate, and then their home websites themselves were only speaking to an internal audience, to the local community of parents, kids that are actually involved with the school. Your website there should be lots of material there that speaks to your target audience, your buyer persona, because it's the place where they're going to find out about you at that awareness point, but also you need to push them further into interest, come along to an open house or fill out a form. It's so important, and so many schools underestimate the value of thinking like a publisher on their own website.
Yeah, and even content aside, if your load times are too slow, then that will kill the experience right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were just looking at a website we're putting a proposal together for a customer. We were looking at it, and all their blog posts loaded in a pop-up window. So you could not see a URL.
Oh dear.
And exactly, you're having the same reaction we did. We're like, you've been publishing and you're losing out any possibility of Google finding you for these keyword-rich articles that you're writing because they're cloaked in an iframe pop-up. I couldn't believe it.
Yes, amazing, amazing. So John, as I mentioned, you go on from kind of the big picture to the more tactical area, and you talk about publishing customer-focused content, search engine optimization, social media, even a chapter on automation. Where do you see the biggest gap with schools and then with businesses in general? Where are they falling short in these more tactical areas?
I think the biggest problem for businesses and schools is that they don't understand the significance of strategically aligning the sales funnel and the content types, the forms of content and channels with the buyer personas. So, for example, a lot of schools will pump information out, pictures, updates on Facebook and social media, and they won't actually know, if you go and ask them, what role those updates have and at which point they are in the sales funnel. So, for example, you might say, well, you're doing all these Facebook updates, but how does that work at the conversion, the decision point process? Have you got any updates there? And they won't understand that. They won't have even thought about that. So what I like to say to them, what we say to them is, think about your purchase point in the buyer circle. You want to have people recommending you to other parents, if we're talking schools, that you want to generate repeat purchases. You want to have them send their kids, their other kids to the school or to generate others for you. So we like to say to them, what social media are you publishing that specifically speaks to your target audience at that point of the sales funnel? So in other words, what will it do to get them recommending you? What are you publishing on your website that actually works at that point in the sales funnel? I think schools are too busy publishing, putting up post updates without actually thinking, what point in the funnel does that piece of content publishing, what point in the funnel does it connect with? Is it aligned with? What strategic buyer persona is it aligned with? And then, of course, the other question is, does my buyer persona prefer video or audio or social media? That whole discussion. And I think it's actually quite simple when you think through it, but schools miss out on that. They haven't grasped that.
Yeah. Funny, my next question was about the sales funnel, so this is a perfect segue. You devote a chapter to building a successful sales funnel. Is this for the school, for the educational sector? Is this a new concept, or maybe just a way of thinking that they may not have considered for their marketing?
That's a difficult one. I think first and foremost, it's almost like a dirty word talking about selling in schools. You get, it's the spin doctors coming in, the evil marketers, but it's a competitive market. I mean, boarding schools, international boarding schools are competing increasingly for students from around the world, not just local markets. And yes, they're beginning to understand that they need to recruit, but to use words like buyer journeys, buyer personas, customers, lead generation, there is a disconnect. The vocabulary, the jargon almost makes them start to think, oh, this is, the evil world of business, not education. So I think as a marketer, and if you're an in-house marketer in a school, you do have to be careful with getting buy-in from other people in the organization.
Yes, and newsflash, education is a business.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. And I think even schools that, for example, here in Sweden, you can't make profit money from your schools. You can't make a profit. But what you can do is every student that comes to your school brings with them a voucher which is worth X amount of money. And so to survive as a school, you need to get students applying to come to you. So, I mean, in a sense, you are marketing your school because every student that applies, even if the money comes from the local authority, is still a student that you're marketing to.
Absolutely. John, we've mentioned several times through our conversation that this is an ebook focused on education, but contains advice that could be applicable to any business. Is there a particular type of business that would benefit the most from this ebook? Mid-size, large, different
I,
industries?
I think if you're in professional services,
Mm.
this kind of book will really speak to you. If I wasn't juggling 150 balls at the same time, Rachel, I would have updated it to put a professional services version out. It's coming, it's in the works,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, I do think it's very very applicable to people in professional services. Whether you're a small team of lawyers, if you're an accounting firm,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in excuse me, if you're in healthcare, because it really walks you through the need to understand your target audience. And everyone's experienced education. We've all been to school,
Mm-hmm.
so we have an understanding of that business, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us will have children and have made decisions about where we put our kids. So I think you've got a case study here that's transferable to other businesses, and it's a case study that you probably easily grasp because you've already understood education.
Sure, everyone has.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, absolutely. John, you mentioned that you have several clients in the educational field. If a school marketer were to pick up your ebook and take some of this advice, how would they know when they get to a point where they say, okay, we've done all we can in-house, we need to pick up the phone and call an agency? How would they go about making that decision?
That's a really difficult question. That's a really difficult question. I think there are two ways of this. I think you could download a book like this, and from our own buyer persona research,
Yes.
eating our own dog food, I would say that a lot of people in organizations are probably going to be one woman, one man teams, one or
Mm,
two people responsible, and they might find all this overwhelming,
mhm,
and therefore maybe you need a strategic call
mhm,
to talk to an agency to get you up and running.
mhm,
But you could have a good grasp of this from the book, start implementing it. And I think the other point, if you can't get started in the first place, the
mhm,
other point is if you've bootstrapped it, it's at the point of understanding your data. Of
mm,
once you've got it all up and running, you might need to turn to an agency to say, well, how do we set up and measure our key performance indicators? How do we know that we're getting a real return on investment?
mhm,
Because if they can map out and create the buyer personas, create different content directed at those buyer personas at different stages of the sales funnel, that's not a difficult recipe to follow
mhm,
once you've got the personnel resources to do it. The
mhm.
complexity, I think, is understanding analytics,
Yeah.
tying in all the codes to be able to measure your ROI. That's where the difficulty is.
Yep, absolutely. Well, John, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I so appreciate learning more about this process. Where can our listeners get themselves a copy of the Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online?
If they go along to moondogmarketing.com ebook schools.
Okay, wonderful. And if they would like to get to know you a little better and follow you on the interwebs, as you like to say, where would they go to do that?
Well, you can go to Twitter, and I'm at Jon Buscall, JonBuscall. But if you're not on Twitter, just Google my name. I've spelt it out there. I'm the only one that's out there.
Oh, good for you. That's good SEO. Wonderful, wonderful. And I should mention that John is a fellow dog lover and has basset hounds. So if you want to see
Perfect.
the occasional Instagram photo of basset hounds having fun, that's always a good follow as well.
Definitely. I get told off for posting too many pictures of dogs. So.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, I encourage everyone to download a copy of the Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online. And we look forward to inviting you back for the next ebook.
Thanks,
All
Rachel.
right. Thanks, John. Many thanks again to Jon Buscall for joining us to chat about his latest ebook, The Essential Guide to Marketing a School Online. Again, Jon's website is moondogmarketing.com, where you'll also find a link to download the ebook, and of course, I will also provide that link in the blog post for this episode. If you have any questions or would like to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you. And the best way to reach me is through the website, resonancecontent.com, or you can always tweet me at @RachParker. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. One thing that Jon and I discussed is the importance of the sales funnel and the need to have a very clear role for each piece of our content in that sales funnel. And, I'm as guilty of this as anyone. We just want to put content out there. We have great ideas. We want to share them, but we do so without a clear vision of where that content fits into the sales funnel. For example, at the very top of the funnel, we're talking about the awareness phase, the stage where the people in your audience are becoming aware of the existence of a solution. And it's very high level. So at that phase, inviting people to a complimentary consultation is probably not the best approach. People might say, wait a minute, I don't even know you, and you want me to have a one-on-one conversation? And they're probably not going to go for that. So that top of the funnel is where we want to offer what I call low-hanging fruit, more general advice on how to solve the problem they're looking to solve. And as they proceed in that funnel or that decision-making process, we can offer a deeper experience with more in-depth resources. And that's where we get into things like ebook downloads, webinars, and then eventually, of course, we do want to invite people to that one-on-one consultation. So as you look at your content marketing program, and especially now that we're starting to plan for 2017, we want to make sure that every element in that program has a specific role to play in our sales funnels, guiding the people in our audience toward that point of making a buying decision. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, remember that you can get a copy of my new book, The Content Marketing Coach, Everything You Need to Get in the Game and Win. It is now available in book and Kindle format on Amazon. To learn more about the book and to snag your copy, visit contentmarketingcoachbook.com. As you know, I always like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Sarah Blakely, also known as the founder of Spanx. She once said, quote, "Embrace what you don't know, especially in the beginning, because what you don't know can become your greatest asset," unquote. Goodness, isn't that the truth? Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.